What if I told you the next world war has already started? But it's not fought with tanks or missiles. It's fought with tariffs, sanctions, and supply chains. Behind every trade deal, there's a hidden agenda. Behind every economic conflict, a silent power shift. Right now, the world's biggest economies are clashing, and the real battle is for control of tomorrow's global order. In the next few minutes, you'll uncover how trade wars are reshaping alliances, collapsing economies, and redrawing borders without a single shot being fired. Stay until the end, because what you're about to see is the future of global warfare. Trade wars are no longer just about protecting local industries. They're strategic weapons used to weaken rivals without ever firing a missile. When the United States hits China with tariffs, or the European Union sanctions Russian goods, the real goal is to shift global leverage. These economic attacks disrupt supply chains, scare off investors, and send shockwaves through entire regions. It's modern warfare disguised as market policy. Take the US-China trade war as a prime example. On the surface, it was about steel, tech, and intellectual property. But beneath that, it was a battle for control over the future of innovation, manufacturing, and digital supremacy. Each tariff imposed by Washington was matched by retaliation from Beijing, leading to a tit-for-tat escalation that rattled global markets and changed international trade routes. But trade wars don't just affect the big players. Smaller nations get caught in the crossfire, forced to pick sides or face economic consequences. Countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America suddenly find themselves pressured by both the East and the West, with their economies dangling like pawns in a much bigger geopolitical game. What makes trade wars so dangerous is their invisibility. They don't make headlines like traditional wars, but they cripple economies, destabilize governments, and reshape alliances behind the scenes. They are slow, calculated, and deeply impactful, and they are silently deciding who will dominate the next century. As trade wars intensify, nations are no longer standing alone. They're forming new alliances for survival. China is deepening ties with countries across Asia, Africa, and Latin America through initiatives like the Belt and Road, offering massive infrastructure deals in exchange for political loyalty. Meanwhile, the US is leading the charge with the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and reinforcing ties with NATO and G7 allies, aiming to contain China's growing influence. This new wave of economic alliances is not based on ideology. It's based on necessity. Smaller countries are being forced to choose sides, balancing between cheap Chinese investment and Western security guarantees. The result? A divided world where supply chains, trade routes, and technology standards are being split down ideological lines, a Cold War 2.0, but this time with containers instead of missiles. Regional powers are also stepping up. India, Brazil, and South Africa are leading the charge within BRICS, pushing for a multipolar world that challenges both the US and China. These countries are using trade deals, currency swaps, and tech agreements to escape dependence on Western-led systems, creating a new axis of economic cooperation that could redefine the global balance of power. In this new order, alliances are no longer just military. They are economic lifelines. Trade is being weaponized, but it's also becoming a tool of resistance, resilience, and repositioning. The question isn't just who has the strongest military, it's who controls the flow of goods, energy, and money. And in this battle, the alliances you build may determine whether you rise or fall. In modern geopolitics, sanctions have become the equivalent of precision airstrikes, but instead of destroying cities, they target economies. When the US and EU imposed massive sanctions on Russia after the invasion of Ukraine, the ruble collapsed. Hundreds of billions in assets were frozen, and entire sectors were cut off from the global financial system. It was an economic earthquake, felt far beyond Moscow. But sanctions aren't just about punishment. They're about pressure and control. By isolating a nation financially, you force its hand politically. Iran has faced years of crippling sanctions that have decimated its middle class and pushed the regime toward more extreme positions. Venezuela's economy imploded under similar measures, leading to mass migration and humanitarian collapse. These aren't side effects. They're the intended outcomes of strategic economic warfare. However, sanctions often come with unintended consequences. They can backfire, pushing countries to form alternative systems that bypass Western control. Russia, China, and Iran are now accelerating efforts to create a parallel financial infrastructure, one that doesn't depend on the US dollar or SWIFT. This shift could fragment the global economy, weakening the very tools that once made sanctions effective. The danger is clear. Sanctions may spark the creation of economic blocs that no longer play by Western rules. Instead of submission, targeted nations might choose resistance, forging alliances with other sanctioned states and trading outside the global mainstream. In this new geopolitical battlefield, sanctions aren't just weapons. They're catalysts for rebellion. For decades, globalization promised a world without borders, where trade flowed freely, supply chains spanned continents, and economic growth lifted all boats. But today, that dream is unraveling. Trade wars, pandemics, and political tensions have triggered a powerful shift. Nations are turning inward, prioritizing economic sovereignty over global integration. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed just how fragile global supply chains truly are. From medicine to microchips, countries realize that dependence on foreign production is a national security risk. Add to that the war in Ukraine, and suddenly, energy, food, and tech became weapons. Now, nations are scrambling to reshore industries and reduce dependence on rivals, even if it costs more in the short term. This wave of de-globalization is redrawing the global map. Instead of one interconnected economy, we are witnessing the birth of regional trade blocs, fractured tech ecosystems, and rival standards. China pushes its own payment systems and internet infrastructure. The US builds domestic chip factories. Europe looks for new energy suppliers. What was once a shared world is now a battlefield of economic independence. And with fragmentation comes conflict. The race for rare earths, water resources, and agricultural dominance is intensifying. Nations no longer see trade as a win-win. They see it as a matter of survival. In this emerging world, the rules are changing fast. The real superpowers won't just be those with weapons, but those who control production, distribution, and innovation within their borders. Raid wars are no longer about economics. They're about control. They decide who leads, who follows, and who gets left behind. In a world where power is shifting silently through supply chains, sanctions, and strategic alliances, the real battlefield isn't on land or sea. It's in ports, data centers, and boardrooms. The countries that master this new form of warfare will shape the next century. If you want to stay ahead of the game, understand the moves before they're made and uncover what the media won't show you. Hit that subscribe button. Because this isn't just about trade, it's about the future of the world.